welcome. So it is true. I am in the Ultimate Frisbee Hall of Fame. And this past weekend, I was in San Diego for the 50th anniversary of Ultimate. And for those of you, how many of you, first of all, know about Ultimate? How many of you have played Ultimate? So that's a pretty good show. 25 years ago, that would have been just me raising my hand. So, and a funny story that is linked to Gen Z, over the course of the weekend, it was like an alumni weekend, get back with all your teams. It was a national championship, so there's a whole group of people playing for that. And then there's those of us, about 500, 700 of us who are alums. And we came out of the stadium, and we had our phones, and I literally hadn't had a beer, just tired. And my buddy and I are looking for our car. We've lost our car. Like, oh my God, like, that's the most ridiculous thing. And we wander around for 30 minutes. So how do you find your car in 2018 when you've lost it? Anybody? Your phone knows where your car is. If you open Google Maps, you look at it and it says your car is here. You don't have to have done anything. My son, who's 20, would have done that in the first minute, and it took us an hour to find our car. So that's why we're here, is to learn more about this generation. So I will stop. A little tiny bit about Jack Morton. We're a brand experience agency, and we've worked with Subway for over a dozen years. It's really been an incredible relationship. And over that relationship, a ton has changed in terms of what brand experience means, and we're going to learn more about that from Megan. But we're really the proof against the promise that a brand puts out there. So as Subway talks about who they are and puts their brand positioning, Jack Morton comes through and creates brand experiences that really deliver on that. And we do it in all kinds of different ways. And we're going to learn a little bit about some of the audiences, the younger audiences, that are frankly interested in different ways of being communicated to. And brands have to really learn how to position themselves. We share parenting, so I have 2 kids. So I live, the way I was describing it to Megan is that as a marketer, I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. They're on phones, let's market to them. As a parent, I'm like, no, this is terrible. They're on phones. So it's like I've got this weird kind of thing going on. But today, it's all going to be about marketing. So let me introduce you. Megan Morelli is the Director of Digital Content for Subway. She's a storyteller at heart. It was fun to learn a little bit more about that. And a believer in social media and really how that and digital media are fundamentally transforming the way we tell stories. And I believe that, and you're going to hear more about it. It's transforming how we build our brands. And it's frankly transforming who we are as people. And that may sound scary or that may be exciting, depending on whether you're older or younger. Prior to joining Subway, Megan spent years on the agency side, conceiving and creating groundbreaking and award-winning campaigns for brands like Snapple, Trojan, Red Stripe. And one of the things I asked Megan was, tell me about your writing. She was the voice, the social voice at Snapple at the beginning of her career, which I think is so fun because Snapple is a really fun brand. So you're going to see that in her personality. In her 2 years at Subway, she has launched the Digital Content Hub, led the creation of the global content strategy, and she is an avid reader and enthusiastic public speaker. So please join me in welcoming Megan to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was a lovely and warm introduction, although I don't know how I follow an Ultimate Frisbee champion. My God, that's a tough act to follow. Very happy to be here. Thank you very much to the Ad Club for having me, and for Jack Morton for inviting and supporting me. As you heard, I am Director of Digital Content for Subway. I have been with the brand for 2 years. We are the largest restaurant franchise in the world, which I didn't know until I started working there. And yes, prior to my time at Subway, I spent a lot of time on the agency side, working on brands like Snapple. And I still have a lot of like under the cap Snapple facts in my head just randomly. Like the only food that doesn't spoil is honey. That's true. They're all true. But I worked on many brands. One brand that I worked on that usually gets some laughs is Trojan condoms. And that actually becomes relevant in a little while. So I'm very excited to be here talking to you about a topic and a generation of kids that I'm really super passionate about. But I just want to caution you that this is not like a blueprint or a set of instructions to just go back and, okay, here's how you're going to talk to these guys and just follow steps 1 through 10. Really what this is a conversation that I hope to start, and I hope that you go back and start having this conversation in the agencies and the brands that you work on. Because I don't think that we're talking about these folks quite enough. So what are we going to talk about today? We're just going to level set on sort of where we are currently. I'll share some quick snapshots about QSR, the quick service industry, briefly. Then we're going to talk about Gen Z. We're going to define them, who they are. We're going to talk about how they've been digital since day one, and that's actually one of my favorite things about them, and we'll dig into that. We'll talk a little bit about brand trust and how Gen Z is changing the game, how to talk to them, and we'll look at a couple of case snapshots. So just quickly about me. Oh, sorry. Storytelling. So you heard it mentioned that I'm a storyteller at heart, and that's absolutely true. If you go all the way back, I was a theater major. Definitely thought I was going to make a living doing Shakespeare, which is how I ended up in marketing. And yes, I was a copywriter way back. In fact, yeah, I was the voice of Snapple. So I joke that I've been in social media marketing since the bronze age of social media marketing, like all the way back in like 2008, 2007. So we are seeing the evolution of how we are telling our stories. And it's an exciting thing to be a part of, but it also means that we as marketers, we need to become fluent in this new language. We need to speak these new languages like a native, right, to be able to really break through with these younger generations. I also believe really in content first. But if content is king, context is queen. It's not just enough to have the right message, right? It has to be the right message delivered to the right person at the right time in the right place. So a little bit about what we're doing in the QSR space and what current consumers are expecting, millennials in particular. Innovation it's innovate or die at this point. The entire category, it is not a secret, the entire category is down, and we are all looking for ways in which to innovate. And innovation can take a lot of different forms. You will see in some McDonald's drive-thrus now that they've got the digital menu boards, right? So that's a form of innovation. One form of innovation that we're leaning into pretty heavily is in innovating our actual food. So not just coming up with a new LTO, but what actual new news can we bring you, new food news can we bring you to enjoy. And also the in-restaurant experience, that has to be innovative and clean and fresh. And the last part, and I think this is maybe not the most important, but certainly important, mobile. So it's not just enough to do all of these things in restaurant. We have to then be able to communicate them out on mobile devices and frankly convert consumers on mobile devices, because the new consumer is convenience first. So if we can't attract and convert them on mobile devices, we're losing. A few things about existing millennial tastes. So this is really funny, right? So they expect health, right? Millennials like to be healthy. They're the ones who gave us kale, thank you. But they also expect like crazy over the top options, because they're also the ones who gave us the unicorn frappuccino. So there's like a little bit of a contradiction there. And so I think particularly for a brand like Subway that we have this equity in health and in choice. How do we marry these two, the kale and the unicorn frappuccino? I think we are doing that by leaning into that choice equity. We're calling it nutrition, N-E-W-trition, because it's not necessarily about like counting calories or counting fat grams. Now it's more about the quality of the food and the quality of the experience you're having while you're eating the food. So we're really leaning into that sort of, here I can show you, making it what you want. So has anyone seen our new campaign that we launched over the year? Yeah, everybody has, right? Yeah, thank you. We're calling it Make It What You Want. And actually the whole line that goes with that is, in life and in food, don't just take what you're given, make it what you want. So if you want that unicorn frappuccino, obviously you're not gonna get it at Subway, but if you want that delicious, indulgent, steak, cheesy, like hypercaloric sandwich, you can get it at Subway. Or if you want that veggie delight, you can have that experience with us too. We're also innovating in our in-restaurant experiences. You will see new Fresh Forward stores opening up all over the country and indeed all over the world. And we're really, really leaning into trying to clean up our food profile to be more transparent, because we know that consumers these days, they want to know what they're eating and where it came from. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it does need to be, it needs to be understandable. They need to understand where it's coming from and what they're eating. So we've done a lot of talking about millennials. Probably all of us in this room have done a lot of talking about millennials recently, and actually over the course of many years. I want us to talk about Gen Z, because I think we're still talking about millennials, and I hear this all the time, all day long. We'll talk about millennials, but I think what we mean is young people, and if what we mean is young people, we mean we specifically mean Gen Z. After all, I have a little brother. He's a millennial. He has a mortgage. He has 2 car payments. He has 2 kids and a dog, and I swear to God, he can see midlife crisis from his front porch. So. Millennials are not like kids hanging out in their parents' dark basements anymore. I'm sure a lot of you are millennials here, and like millennials are doing a lot of adulting these days. So Gen Z is who we're talking about when we're talking about younger people. To put one more point on this, I work with a lot of really smart people, really smart marketers. But some of them say sometimes really dumb things. No, I'm not talking about anybody that I currently work with, but I have been told in meetings, because I've been working on Gen Z for a while. I told you I worked on Trojan. Trojan's a really interesting brand, and it's certainly an interesting category. It's a category that you age into and out of pretty quickly. So I've been looking at Gen Z coming up for quite a while. Anyway, so I've been told in meetings, well, Gen Z doesn't exist. I don't believe in Gen Z. Or this is my favorite one, well, they're just budding millennials, which I guess by that logic makes me a budding baby boomer, and I don't think that that's a thing. So we're gonna talk about Gen Z and who they are and why they're important. But before I get into the specifics, I'm gonna show you 2 videos. We said I'm a storyteller at heart, so I'm up here telling you a few stories. I'm going to tell you a story and show you 2 videos featuring my daughter, Olivia. She's 12 years old, which makes her smack in the middle of Gen Z, right? So she's middle, younger end of Gen Z. The first video I'm going to show you was made by our then young millennial Manny, Sebastian. We're very progressive. And they made this video 4 years ago on a summer afternoon. They had nothing to do, using the tools available to him at the time, right? Namely Snapchat. This is not a well-produced video. This was made on an iPhone by like a 20-something kid and my 8-year-old daughter. We'll watch about 30 seconds of it.
Here I am, Sebastian LaForest, in this wicked park with this wicked beast, Olivia. We're about to trek the forest. Notice how Olivia walks with confidence, knowing that her life may end. We have now entered the forest, and I hear some sort of mating call. Are we safe? Bat, run, run! It's coming after us! So, we just outran the creature. We have no bloody idea what it is. How are you feeling? Speechless. Here we are, still in the forest, lost. We have no idea how long we've been here. It could be days, weeks, or months. Haven't had food in days, multiple moon cycles. I don't know what we're gonna do for water. After months of travel, we have finally found civilization. Look at her run, she's free, y'all!
I don't know what he did with his accent at the end there. But so obviously this is a ridiculous video, and you did not come here to see my home videos, right? It's ridiculous, it's utterly unremarkable mockumentary where he's leveraging his best David Attenborough accent. The only reason I show it to you is because it is a very clear indication of where we were headed 4 years ago. The next video I'm going to show you was made 3 years after this one, so about a year ago, by my then 11-year-old daughter and her 11-year-old best friend, Chloe, in a Sunday afternoon at Chloe's house, when apparently they had nothing better to do. They call themselves the Sound Boys. Yeah. So written, directed, shot, edited by those two little girls. And I should mention R.I.P. Coconut. Coconut has since passed on. I know, it's very sad. So you can see, my point is the speed with which the sophistication is accelerating. We're in hyperdrive, right? So 3 years went between those two videos, and this literally, I picked Olivia up and I said, what'd you and Chloe do today? Oh, nothing. What do you mean nothing? Well, we made some videos, and she just starts scrolling through. They made like, I don't know, a dozen of these. Why does that matter to us as marketers? Well, because I don't know an agency who can work that fast, and certainly not that cheaply. So I think that we do have some things to learn from these kids. And the last point I would make is they're really savvy. It's not just the iMovie capabilities that they have. I mean, the marketing speak that was written into that, it's pretty impressive. So we could learn a lot from the kids. So let's meet Generation Z. Who are they? They are the demographic cohort after millennials, right? So we've established millennials are getting old. So they're the demographic cohort that follows millennials. Typically defined as being born between the mid-90s and the mid-2000s. So that means the oldest among them is in their early 20s. They have no memory of a time before modern technology. So we can say that, but what does that mean? Okay, does it mean that like they have no memory of a time before cell phones? Yes, but this is just like a vehicle to what that actually means if you unpack it. They don't know a world before Google, which means they don't know a world before all of the information that they need they can get, and it's right in the palm of their hand. All of the information, all of the music that they want, all of the video content that they want, the access to food, literally anything is in the palm of their hands, and they don't know what it's like to not have that. Which means, to us as marketers, and certainly in the QSR space, they are completely redefining what convenience is, right? Just completely, it's certainly not a drive-through anymore. They're also the most racially and ethnic diverse group in our nation's history, which I can get like really super kumbaya about that, and I feel really good about that, but we're marketers, so we don't get kumbaya about anything, and we don't get like all the feels. What does that mean, and why is it important? Well, when we talk about segmentation, right, we start at a high level. We talk about Gen Pop, we talk about AFAM, we talk about Hispanic, and we talk about acculturated, non-acculturated. We talk about women and men. Those lines are getting really blurred blurred with these guys because of their diversity. So we're going to have to rethink how we are segmenting our audiences and what messaging is going to resonate with them, because it's not going to be the way it was up until now. The last point I would make here is, they self-identify as, loyal, compassionate, thoughtful, which are all sort of, optimistic attributes that I think we would typically ascribe to younger folks. But they also identify as responsible and determined, which are definitely more pragmatic qualities that I don't think we would normally associate with younger folks. And if you don't believe that they are as determined as they self-identify and say that they are, you don't have to look any farther than the survivors of the Parkland school shootings to see that they really are a determined generation. So these I think are from a J.W. Thompson study. So 63% of them self-identify as influencers, but what does that mean? Like, does it mean take a picture with your product and I'll post it on Instagram and I'm an influencer? Sure, for some of them that's what it means, but more than that, it's about how they think of their spheres of influence. Who has been on Musical.ly? Nobody. Like a couple people. Some of you are like, no, not me. So Musical.ly is this. It's definitely a Gen Z heavy app where you're like creating and sharing videos, music videos with kids from all over the world. So they think of influence in that way. It's a two-way street where first of all, their sphere of influence is much larger. It's certainly beyond the lunchroom table. It's beyond the lunchroom altogether. And they are interfacing with people from all over, people they would not have met previously. And they are sharing that influence. So when we talk about Gen Z as influencers, they know that they have the ability to influence others and that others are influencing them. 48%, I like this one, 48% think of themselves as entrepreneurs. But what does that mean? It's definitely not like our childhood lemonade stand, that's for sure. If you back into the psychology behind why, these are the kids who grew up under the specter of the Great Recession. And again, but what does that mean? Well, it means that a lot of them saw their houses foreclosed on. It means a lot of them saw one or both of their parents lose their jobs. They experienced that deeply, that financial insecurity. They're also the generation that is growing up under just an intractable amount of school debt, right? So go to college, except they don't even know if they're going to be able to find a job that will allow them to pay for the college that they just attended. So their hustle is born from a real place. And then the flip side to that is they have the actual ability, right, to market themselves and to transact right here. So their entrepreneurship and their hustle it's really real, and I think that we will see that continue to evolve. And then 31% of them think of themselves as brands. Again, like unpacking that, what does that mean? It means that they're very carefully curating and distributing content about themselves in the online space, right? So they saw their older, cousins or siblings, millennials, sort of oversharing, right? Because millennials not only gave us kale and unicorn frappuccinos, but also oversharing, and they don't want to do that, right? So it's this generation who sort of has driven the desire for more ephemeral communications, the Snapchats, and some of the more ephemeral apps. But so they're being very careful, they're carefully curating their image online in ways that we've not seen previously. Digital since day one. Okay, so I think this is important. Steve was talking about, it's like marketing is like, yeah, this is great, they're on their phones, like market to them, but like as a parent, oh no, they're on their phones and that's terrible. We have that mindset, and certainly as parents, we have that mindset, and I think it's real, but I also think we're thinking about it differently. Again, this is a generation who doesn't know life that's not connected. And so we've done all of these studies, right, about what screen time can do to your self-esteem, that it causes depression, and that might be true, and that certainly might have been true for the transition generation. But these kids view this very differently. They don't see the connected and disconnected as clearly defined as we do. For them, this is just like an extension of IRL. This is an extension of their real lives. And it's certainly, as I was saying about them curating themselves as brands, it's an extension of how they see themselves and how they're portraying themselves in the world. And they're certainly researching and collaborating, as you see in those silly videos, on content that they are then distributing out there in the world. So I think while we get nervous about the screen time, and I do think that the screens are going to go away, I think the screens are already going away, and we'll be back to more voice operated technology and more immersive. So they're really looking at this connectivity as possibility. Bless you. They're also living in a mobile-first world, which I'm going to keep hammering on this because it's really important. It's not just about, like, when we say mobile-first and we're in marketing, what do we mean? Okay, we mean small-form content, right? And we mean vertical video. We used to talk about sound off, and now we talk about sound on. But really what we're talking about is the ability to connect with, reach, engage, and convert them all on a mobile device, because you're not going to reach them on linear TV, and we're not going to reach them really on desktop or on laptop. They do all of their content creating and sharing and content consuming on their mobile devices. And P.S., that's also where they're transacting. This generation is 4 times less likely to use cash than any other generation. So if you are looking to convert Gen Z, you better make sure that they're able to pay with their mobile wallet and not their actual wallet, because they won't have any money in there. We'll talk a little bit about brand trust. And we'll talk a little bit about their spending behavior. So while they are coming into their spending power, their spending and their earning power into that 18 to 34 demographic, they do have money to spend, and they're spending a significant portion of it in my vertical, which is another reason that I care about them so much. I think they spend something like a full 20% of their budgets on food. So they're super important to me. And they're influencing their families' purchasing decisions as well. But with regard to brand trust, this is a very skeptical generation, and with good reason. Their skepticism is warranted. This is a generation that has grown up, right, with, like I said, the Great Recession. They're the generation growing up with school shootings. My daughter has been doing lockdown drills in her school on a regular basis since the 6th grade. So that inherent understanding that school is not even necessarily a safe place certainly warrants some skepticism. So they are a generation that expects to be duped, right? And now with the advent of fake news, they really don't know where they can put their trust. And so if we as brands want them to trust us, we need to be trustworthy and transparent. So this is just a little bit of a recap. So to see their level of impact on their family's spending, 70% of them are influencing their family's spending. And they do need that brand trust, and we won't win it quickly or easily. We do need to protect our equity if we want to make sure that we're engendering that trust, and it's not going to happen overnight. And just remembering that skepticism of this generation, I think, is really important. And I think it's coming up in a slide or two. This is when we're going to start talking about influencer marketing and why it's so important to reach this generation. So we call them a generation of game changers. Why? Well, so first of all, they're big, so they make up 25% of our population. They're coming into a plurality of all consumers in the very near future, and they are entering their prime spending years, as we talked about previously. But more interestingly, I think how they are behaving in the mobile space, in the digital space, that's going to intersect with how we as brands need to behave and need to talk. Again, referencing those silly little movies, we need to make sure that we are creating content that is relevant to them, that resonates with them, that doesn't break our banks, right? Because it is disposable. This content is disposable. If we get them to spend 10 seconds with it, we're like, right on. Like that's a big win for us, because we are told that we can't expect maybe more than a second and a half. And that's also something else that is said. I've heard said about this generation that they are an attention deficit generation, and I think that that's not giving them enough credit. I don't think they're an attention deficit generation. I think because they have grown up with this, they have a really advanced, well-honed bullshit filter, and they can filter in and out what is relevant to them in a couple of seconds. So their behavior absolutely is going to intersect with how we as brands are choosing to behave. And again, they're redefining that idea of connectivity and what it means to connect with somebody. For this generation, a group text is the same as hanging out, right? It's the same as it was when I would get on a three-way call with my two best friends when I was in middle school. So they're redefining that connectivity. So influencer marketing, I think this is like a super buzzy topic that people have been talking about for several years. And a lot of brands and a lot of people are skeptical about it. And I think that that's smart, but I have seen it work and work really, really well. I worked on an influencer campaign when I was with Trojan. Does anybody know Little Dicky? I know that's the other laugh, right? It's like I say Trojan and then I say Little Dicky and that's the other laugh. We didn't hire him because of his name. We hired him, so if you think of like a young Woody Allen in 2018, super awkward, super self-deprecating, but he also raps. And he talks a lot, he's a comedian and a rapper, he talks a lot about safe sex, just generally. So a partnership really made a lot of sense, and I won't belabor the point, but you can imagine the suggestion made the client very nervous. But we got the client there, created a great 4-minute video that he had artistic license to just own. And long story short, at the end of the quarter, we got a call from the brand manager saying, this is terrific. We've seen a significant lift in sales at Walmart, which is like their canary in the coal mine. We want to go ahead and do a whole campaign with him. So the point I'm making is that influencer marketing can work if it is really authentic and it makes a lot of sense, and it's not just here's me with a picture of you with your product and post it on Instagram and it's like a one and done. So going back to that skepticism of this generation, why are they not skeptical of influencers? Well, we've established that they don't trust the news, they don't trust social media, they don't trust brands, and they don't really trust traditional celebrities. They have developed these almost relationships with the influencers that they gravitate towards, where they self-report that they feel like they are friends, they feel like they are peers. And even if an influencer is working with a brand, somehow there is an authenticity there on the receiving end of the younger consumers. They feel that this influencer, yes, is working with a brand, but they're working with this brand because they love the brand. And again, I would use the Little Dicky example as proof of that authenticity. This is an area that we are trying very hard to get right at Subway. We're not there yet, but we're working on it. So look for more on that in 2019. Hopefully we'll get there in 2019. And then just sort of a data point here about why. So we talked about the why kids are leaning into influencers. Well, brands should be too, because we've got 72% of teens on Instagram daily. So again, it's about reaching them where they are. We can't expect them to come to us anymore. So just a couple of points that I think I made previously, but to reiterate, they're definitely independent, and that idea of like information on demand, they want everything on demand. It's like the Uberization of culture, right? Everything, I want it when I want it, and I want it right now. So for us as brands, figuring out that aspect of convenience and conversion, literally any time of the day, that's a big challenge for us. they're also no longer sort of limited by geography or by borders. I was actually, I was listening to NPR the other day, and I heard a young music artist being interviewed, and her music is sort of a cultural fusion, and different couple of different cultures that she fuses together. And what she said was, we don't believe in borders anymore. We cross them. And I think that that is absolutely true about this generation. And you can see it, I mean, they're sort of like cultural nomads, right? And you can see it with the infusion of like anime and K-pop, Korean pop music in young American culture. And it's because they are living in this almost borderless world. And really, for us as marketers, again, if we can't be kumbaya about anything, they're really poised for global business, and they're poised to be global consumers. Okay, so how do we talk to them? I'm just going to say it again. It says mobile first. It should just probably say mobile, period. Mobile, mobile, mobile. We're not going to reach them anywhere else, certainly not in any significant way. And we talk about, like, it's hard to get them off their phones. Well, that's where they're engaged. So we better make sure that we're there reaching them with the relevant messaging and able to convert. Okay, so this is a woo, look at that sandwich. Doesn't that look delicious? So this is a Snap opportunity, a Snapchat AR lens that we had the opportunity to work on with a third party, Kabak. We shot this in our, this was my attempt to be as nimble as my child with video content creation. We shot this in our offices. It took like a whole day, and it definitely was not free. But we shot this in our offices and ended up creating this really fun AR experience that you could use when you were on Snapchat. So this was just an example of us playing with it in the office. So why? I mean, certainly this is not going to convert anybody, right? And that's not even the functionality. But if I can get Gen Z to spend 10 seconds playing with my brand, playing with my sandwich, then that's a win, particularly in this space. So that then it's driving that brand awareness, and it's driving that brand love, because I'm giving them something to engage with that is playful and fun. Another brand who attacked this very differently, Boxed Water. So Boxed Water leaned into more of an altruistic angle, right? So this generation, they're also very invested in climate change in particular. I mean, if you look at the UN report that just came out like a week or two ago, they are literally looking at a potential world where Manhattan or Miami are underwater. So climate change is extremely important to this generation. So Boxed Water, in an attempt to sort of get in there with an altruistic message, they're planting 2 trees for every photo you posted, and utilize the hashtag that they ascribe to it, a better planet. So I think that's a really interesting way to go about it. If you look at how millennials were interacting with more altruistic, social responsibility brands like Tom's, like Warby Parker, it was sort of a passive exchange. Well, I need shoes. Okay, I'll feel better about myself if I buy the shoes from Tom's, because they'll give shoes to somebody else. But all I did was buy shoes. This is a little bit more of a value exchange, and it's a value exchange that the brand is looking for with a target that we've already established, is carefully curating what they put out there online. So if you're engaging, if you're Gen Z and you're engaging in this with this brand, that's a big step, right? And so you are truly engaged with this brand, because if you're curating your social and digital footprint, you're not automatically just going to hashtag everything that every brand asks you to do. So Boxed Water got in there with a topic that matters a lot to this generation. Less altruistic, Sour Patch Kids. This is sort of so clearly this is their demographic. Clearly, Gen Z is super important to these guys. The point that I would make here is about their agility as a brand. They are moving the bulk of their media spend off of linear TV and off of Facebook. And they're leaning into channels like Snapchat, YouTube, Instagram to really continue to reach this cohort. Couple other cases that I just want to talk to quickly. I think I'm okay on time. In speaking about like not reaching them in the linear TV, when I was working on Trojan, they were sponsors of the MTV Video Music Awards. And it was like their Super Bowl. And so we really went all in on trying to reach and engage this younger target around that video awards show, because that's what we tell ourselves as marketers, right? Well, linear TV is going away, but it's all about the live events. People are still tuning in for live events. And yes, people are still tuning in for live events, but what we saw was year over year, actual viewership declining on MTV and their associated channels. But what we saw was consumption of related content increasing on Snapchat. So while these kids are interested in the live events, they're still consuming them in different ways. So this is an example that Gatorade did around the 2016 Olympics. So they were serving an ad where you could swipe up to have an experience where you could see a 7-minute video with Usain Bolt. I think it was a third of those who were served this ad swiped up, and almost 40% watched the entire 7-minute video. 7 minutes is a really long time. So it's about sort of delivering that message where they are in a context of even that live cultural event. And so the next one is it's clearly the home run, right? So obviously we all saw the Nike campaign, the Colin Kaepernick. This was so powerful, and again, would love to get kumbaya about this, but there's not a CFO in the world who would have let this campaign go out if they didn't have a whole hell of a lot of research to back it up, to say that no, our current and probably very near future, sort of aspirational target, this matters to them a lot. And so we need to put a stake in the ground. We need to be bold. We need to take this risk. And it obviously paid off for them. We saw, they increased their sales by 30%. So it's not enough. And this is what we were talking about, reaching them with a message that matters and not playing it safe and taking a risk. This is what these kids expect, right? These kids expect brands to be bold and to be transparent, because frankly, as brands anymore, we are not just competing with other brands. I'm not just competing with McDonald's or Taco Bell or even Starbucks. And I'm not even just competing with all of the brands that you guys represent in this room. We are all competing with culture, right? So if we want to break through, I don't just have to break through and serve up a better ad than McDonald's. I have to also compete with whatever Taylor Swift just said, and I have to compete with whatever the president just tweeted. And all of that noise is the surround sound that we are trying to break through. So we have to think about culture, which is why this campaign was so impactful. And then sort of as a postscript to that, Goldfish taking some risks, some calculated risks, appealing to LGBTQ families. So it's interesting to see how brands are more authentically inserting themselves into culture. And I think I'm almost finished, I promise. I've got 5 minutes. So this is just one of my favorite marketing advertising ads. It's oh, we've got the new creative, and it's people over here I love it, and awesome, and oh no, I hate it. And so what do we decide to do? No, this is definitely too polarizing. Let's go with the one where everyone felt equally ambivalent. Has that ever happened? Yeah. We can't afford to be ambivalent anymore. If we're trying to break through the noise of culture that I was just talking about, we cannot be ambivalent. And that is something that we at Subway have struggled with for a while, and what we have heard from our consumers is, well, you're okay, you're very functional, you're very transactional. So we have spent the last year trying to get to a more breakthrough emotional space. I'm going to show you just a quick anthem spot that we released earlier this year. And it was polarizing, and I'll tell you why after. I'll tell you about the arguments that we had. A lot of fun to work on. Definitely a new tone for Subway for sure. Polarizing. Why? Anyone guess why? Did you hear the bleep? There were a lot of people who were like, that's awesome. And then there were a lot of people who were like, you are kidding me. There is no way we are putting that on the air. Well, we did. We put it on the air. And we definitely heard from people out there in the field that they did not think that was appropriate. But the point is, we took a risk, right? We took a calculated risk to break through in culture in the ways that we have been talking about. Just quickly sort of talking about them as a revolution, right? So just reiterating, they're coming up on being a plurality of consumers in a very short time. And they are entering those prime earning and spending years, right? They are entering into the 18 to 34 years. And they really, they are replacing millennials as the young people, the influencers, the influential kids who are driving the way culture is headed. So don't say millennials anymore unless you mean like my little brother with the mortgage and the car payments. And what questions should we be asking ourselves? Like, are we being nimble? Are we operating in nimble ways that allow us to pivot on a dime as quickly as culture might pivot? Am I meeting them where they are, or am I trying to pull them into where I still am and am comfortable as a brand? I mean, when was the last time you clicked on a banner ad? Seriously, anyone? Like, yeah. I mean, so we need to. It's about content and it's about delivering it in impactful ways where they are, telling stories that matter to them. Think of the boxed water. Are we testing? Because this landscape is so uncertain and shifts so rapidly. I say all the time, it's like surfing in heels, right? Like this landscape is always evolving, and the only way we can get smarter is with testing. And then the last point I would make is they expect a dialogue with everyone, right? They expect a dialogue with the K-pop stars that they're on Musical.ly with, and they expect a dialogue from us. So it's not enough to just have sort of staid response on Twitter. They really want to engage in a dialogue. If they reach out to you as a brand, we need to engage them authentically. So that's really it. I think this is a really exciting time to be a marketer. I think that they are a really exciting generation. I have a lot of hope for them. And they're very different than anyone we've ever marketed to before. So my hope is that, in the ways in which they want to dialogue with us, like I hope we as marketers want to dialogue with them. I hope that we want to continue to learn from them and allow them to make us smarter and more effective. I think that's it. So, thank you.
Hey, Megan, thank you very much. I got a quick question for you.
Sure.
Just the last thing that you said. You said dialogue. I'm
Yes.
David Cutler. Hi.
Hi.
Cheap seats. Here, there you are.
There you go.
You said dialogue. That's a hell of a word. How do you do that? How do you actually have a two-way dialogue? Is that a technological element? Is that something you've resourced so people can answer back? Literally having that two-way relationship is really hard. Are there examples, like the great examples you've given about awareness and engagement, that actually includes true relationships in this dialogue word that you throw out?
So I think that's a great question. I'll give you one initial example at Subway. So when I joined Subway 2 years ago, I don't even know if I'm allowed to tell you this, but it won't leave this room, right? When I joined Subway 2 years ago, we did not have a dedicated social response team or plan, which is bonkers. That's bananas. We had some people who were operating part-time. They had other jobs in the company, and then they'd be like, oh yeah, I'll be on Twitter for 3 hours. That's dangerous. It lacks consistency in terms of tone and messaging, right? Lots of stuff got missed. We didn't moderate Instagram at all. So it's a lot of missed opportunities, right? If you've got people reaching out to your brand, you want to reach out back. I would say it's the same as calling, right? If I'm gonna call customer care is not going to just not pick up. They have to answer and talk to me. So it's thinking about it in that way. So over the last 2 years, we have built out a dedicated entire team and system for listening, customer care and social response, proactive and reactive. What does that look like? So we've got the customer care stuff, like came in, had a crappy sandwich, and we deal with that, right? But then we're also looking for proactive opportunities that we can start a conversation. So somebody might, tweet or Instagram their sandwich and that they loved it. Like Chrissy Teigen, she snapped that she slept with her meatball sub, and she had this crumbled up thing on her back. But it's looking for
Did you
those.
bring Trojans to that?
I mean, don't get me started on the foot-long jokes that they overlap. It's too early.
So you have a database where this anonymous Christy or whatever her name is now part of your dialogue, and you're including her in give and take?
So in this evolution of our ability to engage in this dialogue, right? So the first was just establishing a dedicated team to do this, to react to what people are saying, but then also proactively look for opportunities to speak to them. And now I think the next step is finding those super fans, is what we're calling them, and how do we engage them in more of a relationship? You could almost call it a micro-influencer, because an influencer is no good to me if they don't love my brand, right? So that's sort of the evolution that we're looking for in 2019, is how do we leverage these super fans? Because we are starting to learn who they are and what they look like and how they behave. So how do we bring them into the family? We also have a very large system. How do we get the system excited about extending that dialogue even in an in-restaurant experience? Does that sort of answer your question? Okay. Mm-hmm.
Just picking up on the conversation about dialogue, which I think is a really interesting place to start. I have a 15-year-old girl and an 18-year-old boy. Mm-hmm. Neither one of them follow any brands on Instagram or Snapchat or anything. So what is it that compels someone in Gen Z to follow a brand, and maybe a QSR brand in particular?
Well, so that's a great question. Do they follow influencers? Minimal? Yeah. I think they are interested in connecting with people, which is why one of the reasons that brands are leveraging influencers to try to get in. I think we will see if they have that brand loyalty. They might follow the brand, but you don't have to follow the brand to interact with the brand, right? So they might not want to see all of the content that I'm putting out there, but every time if they love my brand, if they're one of my super fans, they might tweet or Instagram, every time that they're encountering my brand. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a follow. It's more of that interaction. Yeah.
Hi there, I'm Danielle over at Her Campus Media. So for me, I actually went to school in Florida, and I was so pumped that there was a Subway on my college campus.
Yeah.
So working now too in college marketing, curious to, from the Subway perspective, that experience with your on-campus stores and then your brick and mortar stores, and if there's any conversation around, how those experiences are impacting them as well, since that may be their go-to at this pivotal age.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that's something that we have talked about internally as a real opportunity for us, because we do have such a large footprint on college campuses that's a great place for us to. And what I hear a lot of is like, oh yeah, I would totally come in when I was really hungover, get a meatball marinara. But yeah, I think that's a great opportunity for us. Again, not just to market to them, but also to hear back from them to see how we can get a little bit smarter as a brand, targeting them. But we are not there yet, but those are conversations we're having.
Hi, I have a question.
Yeah.
You showed us the commercial. Was it a 30-second commercial?
That might have even been, I don't know if that was the 30 or the 60 version.
Okay.
It was our anthem spot.
Okay. And you said it was controversial when it aired or when it hit the air. Where and how did it hit the air?
Well, so we ran that spot in broadcast. Which is, so you know who you're reaching, right? So, and we got some pushback from some franchisees and in between like Philadelphia and like Sacramento, in that middle part of the country. We heard that it was inappropriate. We also heard from some consumers also, in that sort of middle space of the country, that it was inappropriate, and the bleep, and kids, hearing that, which frankly I think that they hear a lot worse everywhere else. But we then leveraged that look and that feel and that energy across all of our channels. So we were doing, 6 seconds spots on ads on Snapchat. So we definitely, and it was not just a cut down, we were trying to be very platform specific, but staying true to the nature of the entire campaign. But where we got the pushback, really, the only place is in broadcast.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, this is Peter from C-Space. You talked about authenticity. So as you match the messaging with the experience, how do you make sure you get it right on the experience side with Gen Z?
You mean like in restaurant?
Yeah, in restaurant, food. You talked about food development.
Yeah, we're working on that. I think, and I think it's really important. And I say this all the time in my office. I can market the hell out of anything, but if I, get you to reconsider my brand, and I drive you in restaurant with my brilliant marketing, and you have an experience that is the same experience you had at Subway 15 years ago, and it's the same sandwich, you are never coming back, and it doesn't matter what message I send you. So we are working really hard to work on these things in concert, and it's hard, and it's hard for we're 27,000 restaurants in the country, in North America, 27,000. Like, as a comparison, McDonald's I think has 16,000. So we have a lot of experiences that we need to change. So it's leaning in on food innovation, it's leaning in on how do we update that in-restaurant experience, and then how do we redefine convenience for us? We just launched third-party delivery, which is another way that we're trying to create that more customized, personalized experience. Like in life and in food, don't just take what they give you, make it what you want. So we're trying, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. All right. Sure. So I don't know if you guys could hear, what were the metrics and measurements for success for the Anthem campaign, and how did it play out? So there were lots, right? So there were the media ones. I deal less with those. I'll speak to some of the more brand metrics. I'm not sharing any secrets. I'm not telling you anything that you couldn't Google. Our sales have been in decline for 5 years. So we really went into this year committed to stabilizing, and we knew that to do that, we needed to change perception of our brand. We don't have an awareness problem, we have a perception problem. So we leaned in really heavily on this sort of more emotional, energetic, more youthful, potentially polarizing campaign to help us do that, while simultaneously launching a new product. We launched Wraps earlier this year, and that was the first new product we've launched in a while. And the combination of those two things, we have seen sales stabilize, and we have seen an increase in positive brand buzz over the course of this year. So I think those are softer metrics, but those are the things that, as sort of content that I was meant to deliver on. And then I think, as we're going into 2019 with third-party delivery and pushing our mobile experience and our loyalty program, I think we're going to see those metrics switch to actual conversion. But we have seen that stabilization in sales and improvement in brand perception. Thank you very much. This was great. Thanks, guys. And there's a baseball game or something happening tonight. Good luck.